When I was 3 months pregnant, my husband insisted I accompany him on horseback riding. At the stables, he rode with remarkable skill, galloping at full speed despite my reluctance. His gaze, however, kept flickering subtly toward the edge of the field. I grew suspicious and wanted to ask him about it, but exhaustion overcame me, and I drifted into a deep sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up groggy and instinctively reached out to touch my husband. However, the sheets beside me were cold and empty. The man who always claimed to love me was at the stables, laughing and joking with another woman. "Don't be mad, Sasha. How about I'll be your horse?" The usually composed and dignified Darrell Wise was acting like a lovesick boy. Without hesitation, he dropped to the ground on all fours, completely unbothered. Those knees, so proud that they wouldn't even kneel when he proposed to me, now bent so easily for another woman. Hidden in the shadows of the trees, I clutched my belly and silently cried. Meanwhile, Sasha Middleton, pouting, still wasn't satisfied. "Darrell, you let that woman ride with you earlier today. I'm so jealous," she whined. Hearing this, Darrell stood, cupped Sasha's face, and kissed her deeply. As their emotions intertwined, he let out a throaty sigh of desire. "Sasha, I only did that because you were ignoring me," he murmured. "Otherwise, would you have come looking for me?" His explanation made Sasha giggle uncontrollably. Every word they exchanged completely disregarded me, his wife, and the unborn child I was carrying. Unable to hold back, I interrupted coldly. "So, my baby and I are just props in your little show." Startled, Darrell stepped in front of Sasha, shielding her instinctively. "Camelia, why are you here? If I hadn't come, how would I know what kind of person you really are?" I sneered, fighting the ache in my chest. "How would I know that the two people who claim to care about me the most are betraying me behind my back?" Darrell's face paled as he hurried over, grabbing my hand. "Camelia, it's not what you think. I was just asking Sasha for advice on how to make you happy. I've noticed you've been so down lately." He wasn't entirely wrong. Sasha did have a knack for cheering me up. If I hadn't seen them kiss with my own eyes, I might have believed his excuse. But now, it was just one more reason for my heart to break. I shook off his hand and took a step toward Sasha, but before I could even lift a finger, Darrell immediately shoved me back hard. Tensed. "Camelia, stop it. Sasha isn't your punching bag." Staggering back a few steps, I steadied myself, my eyes filled with hurt as I stared at him. Darrell avoided my gaze, mumbling under his breath, "You're the one who lashed out first without thinking." I let out a bitter laugh and glared at him. "When did you see me lay a hand on her?" I had no intention of doing anything to Sasha, yet Darrell's attitude couldn't have been clearer. From behind him, Sasha finally poked her head out, her tone laced with indignation. "Camelia, enough already. Darrell and I have been putting up with you because you're pregnant, but you're just too much." Too much? It was only then that I realized how good she was at playing the victim, twisting everything to suit her narrative. I couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Sasha, is this how you've been stringing Darrell along?" "You," she trailed off, gritting her teeth. "That's enough, Camelia." Darrell cut off sharply. "Stop being so irrational. Let's just talk when you've calmed down." Turning to Sasha, he grabbed her hand and said, "Sasha, let's go." With that he led her away, leaving me standing there alone with my heart shattered. After defending Sasha, Darrell stormed off, gripping her hand tightly, leaving me alone in the cold night air to collect my thoughts. I stood there until the first rays of dawn lit up the sky. Only then did I force my stiff legs to move. When I returned to my room, it was a mess. Darrell had carelessly thrown my belongings all over the floor. I let out a bitter laugh and knelt down, slowly picking up my scattered clothes and folding them neatly. When I tried to leave and drive home, I realized he had also taken the car we came in. Frustrated, I kicked the nearest step, only to feel a sharp pain in my belly the next second. A hot, unsettling sensation followed, and dread filled me. Something was wrong. Panicking, I pulled out my phone to call Darrell, hoping he could contact someone at the stables to help. Unfortunately, he didn't answer. Despite that, I kept calling as I started walking toward the stables, clutching my stomach. The path was empty, no one in sight. Just as despair was about to consume me, Darrell finally picked up, but his irritated voice came through the line before I could say a word. "Camelia, aren't you done causing trouble? Sasha didn't sleep well because of you, and now that she's finally getting some rest, you're calling me despite knowing it might wake her up. Why can't you just let people be happy?" And just like that, he hung up and turned off his phone. I thought calling him would bring relief, but it felt like a cruel shove deeper into my misery instead. Tears streamed down my face as I clutched my stomach, sobbing uncontrollably. The more I cried, the less I could stop myself. Eventually, I just sank to the ground, wailing in defeat. My cries must have drawn someone nearby because the next thing I knew, I was being rushed to the hospital. Even though I could barely stay conscious, I forced myself to sign the necessary forms before passing out completely. When I woke up, the room was eerily quiet. Suddenly, I remembered what had happened earlier. Panicky, I reached for the IV and pulled it out. I had to know if my baby was okay. But before I could leave, a nurse entered to check on me and immediately stopped me. Her gaze was full of sympathy as she softly said, "You're still young. You can have another baby." Another baby. Her words echoed in my mind as my thoughts went blank. I let her guide me back to bed and reinsert the IV. This time I didn't resist. I was too numb to do so. When she left, the weight of her words finally hit me. I clutched the sheets and broke down, sobbing so hard it felt like my chest might burst. After the tears subsided, a strange clarity settled over me. Maybe losing the baby was for the best. At least they wouldn't have to grow up with parents like Darrell and me. 3 days later, the doctor said I was recovering well enough to move around a little. As such, I went up to the rooftop for some fresh air. While I stood there, taking in the view, my phone suddenly buzzed. It turned out it was Darrell. With a faked concern he asked, "Camelia, how are you feeling? Is the baby giving you any trouble? I was too impulsive before. I shouldn't have left you like that. If you want, I can send someone to bring you back right now. His words sounded like an apology on the surface, but coming from him, they felt more like charity. I had seen how he treated Sasha, gentle, doting, sincere. The contrast was almost laughable. Facing the wind, I stood tall and coldly replied, Darrell, let's get a divorce. I meant every word, but instead of agreeing, he exploded with anger. Camelia, don't think you can do whatever you want just because you were pregnant. We're married and vowed to stay by each other's side no matter what, so don't even think about leaving me. Sometimes I can't help but find Darrell ridiculous. He and Sasha had been caught red-handed, yet he still acted like he loved me. Darrell, just how can you still talk about love with such confidence after hurting me like this? I asked sharply. Don't you think you're being a hypocrite? I asked, my voice laced with mockery. Or have you worn that mask for so long that even you believe it? Hearing it, Darrell bristled with anger. Embarrassed and annoyed, he snapped, I don't have the energy to argue with you. With that, he slammed down the phone. That afternoon, I received a message from one of his co-workers. Camelia, are you taking time off to rest during your pregnancy? We can't survive without you around. Her words were exaggerated. All I ever did was calm Darrell down when he got upset at them. I was about to respond when another message came through. A video of Sasha throwing all my belongings out of my office with the following message. Camelia, your nest has been taken over. Wearily, I typed back, let them have it. Then I closed my eyes and lay on the bed. That office had been a gift from Darrell, a way to flaunt his affection back when he still pretended to care. Since that's no longer the case, he can give it to whoever he wants. I didn't care anymore. However, Sasha wasn't satisfied. She started calling me repeatedly, and I reluctantly answered, only to be met with her smug, domineering tone. So different from the way she used to speak. Camelia, you don't need to come back to the office anymore, she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. Darrell said your temper's been all over the place because of your pregnancy, and he doesn't want you disrupting his work. So, he's given the CEO's wife's office to me. She made sure to emphasize CEO's wife like it was some grand title, but being the CEO's wife wasn't as glamorous as she thought. Good luck holding on to that position, I replied coolly before hanging up and removing the SIM card from my phone. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, the divorce agreement I had prepared was ready. With it in hand, I went straight to the company. I noticed that the old employees I passed by quickly lowered their heads after offering me awkward, silent greetings, but I didn't pay much attention to it. When I reached Darrell's office, I saw Sasha practically draped over him. The moment I stepped in, Darrell bolted upright as if he'd been caught red-handed. Camelia, why are you here? His opening line was as predictable as ever, and I was too tired to entertain it. I walked straight to his desk, tossed the divorce papers onto it, and said coldly, sign it. His brows furrowed in confusion as he picked up the document. The moment he realized what it was, his expression darkened, and he slammed it back onto the desk. Camelia, have you lost your mind? He roared. I gave you time to calm down, not to come up with this nonsense. Despite that, I didn't bother engaging with his tantrum and just firmly repeated, sign it. Realizing I wasn't backing down, his tone shifted. His eyes darted nervously before softening. Camelia, you're just emotional because of the pregnancy. Don't do something you'll regret. Ignoring him, I shifted my gaze to Sasha. At first, she looked panicked, but she quickly composed herself and stepped between us with a calculated air of innocence. Darrell, don't be mad, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Camelia is only upset because you've been so good to me. That's why she's acting out and asking for a divorce. Maybe you should just agree for now. When she's calmed down, you can get back together later. Her attempt at stirring the pot was laughably transparent. Anyone with half a brain could see through her ploy. And yet, to my disbelief, Darrell nodded in agreement, looking at her with approval. You're right, he said before turning to me, his expression one of condescending disappointment. Camelia, I've spoiled you too much these past few years. You could learn a thing or two from Sasha about being reasonable. I guess it's time you learned a lesson and got some perspective, Darrell said smugly. Don't worry, once you've had the baby, we'll get remarried. With that, he picked up the divorce papers and signed his name without hesitation. I let out a sigh of relief, only to catch Sasha staring at me with a smug, taunting expression. Her confidence made me laugh. Clapping my hands slowly, I said, love truly is powerful. It was the only thing that could turn someone as clever as Darrell into such a fool, blindly believing whatever he was told. Before I could leave, Darrell stopped me again. Camelia, if you change your mind, just call me. You'll always be my wife. He spoke with such faux sincerity, completely ignoring the storm brewing on Sasha's face, which had darkened like a thundercloud. But I didn't believe a word of it. Just as I was about to step away, he called out again, his tone softer this time. Camelia, take care of yourself during the pregnancy. When the baby is born, we'll finally be a happy little family of 3. The mention of the baby hit me like a punch to the chest. A sharp pain tore through me, making it hard to stand upright. I couldn't understand why he'd say something like that now. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was just another game. Either way, it didn't matter. It was far too late. Looking him straight in the eye, I said firmly, the child's gone.